But look, here's the thing, right? So I've learned a lot from Nick, and Nick throughout the years, as he's coached his children and then coached my children, so but I want to talk about like the journey. So like, you played professional ball. First of all, most importantly, your husband and a father. Talk to me about how you made the transition from a youth, or I guess a young lad playing professional ball, and the transition into your journey into and your next steps from there.
Yeah, man. Well, if I was to put the transition from baseball into real life, into truly doing um, what I do today, that would probably be about probably I'd probably say that's the worst 10 years of my life. It was one of the hardest things to do was to go from what I was known as, which was a baseball player. I was a baseball player for 20 years and at over 20 years. And at 27 years old, all of a sudden I wasn't a baseball player anymore. And I truly struggled with what that meant. Like literally, I think I looked in the mirror one day 6 months later after retiring, and I was still wearing the exact same clothes that I wore as a baseball player. So I wasn't giving anybody a fighting chance to look at me as anything other than a baseball player because I couldn't even do it for myself, man. So it was extremely hard. Well, we could just call it an identity crisis.
Man, it's funny you say that. And guys, we didn't, Nick and I haven't talked about this, but in my career, I was a distribution warehouse guy, and then I had to make a transition. And the number one thing I struggled with was, who am I? Now that I'm not vice president or whatever it is, and I had an identity crisis too. So it's good to hear, like, and this is the kind of stuff we like to talk about because we all got the same struggles and we all go through the same thing. So what did you do? I mean, what was the day you decided this is, because for me, what happened to me was I had to go ahead and just say it one day and say, you know what, I sell real estate now. And until I got to that point, I wasn't successful. So what was the turning point for you, and how did you make that transition and like really break through with it?
Well, again, it was I was telling my son literally last night. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily a fast learner, but people tell me on a regular that I'm smart. I've been on like a 12-year, 15-year crash course of business, marketing, um, social media, business development, brand development, and I've had my head down for at least 15 years without even looking up. You know, I'm not. I'm talking like while my friends are watching college football, I'm not. I'm either with my kids or I'm working on personal development. So it's kind of like that Kobe Bryant philosophy. Kobe would say every time that I work out for 3 more hours than everybody else, multiply that 3 hours times 365 days in a year, and that's how far I got ahead. That's literally what I decided to do, man. So there really wasn't a day where I realized I was just who I am today. It was literally a long, ongoing journey that looking back, it was a beautiful journey, dude, but it was rough, man. It really was rough. But like every storm runs out of rain, and I learned to run into the storm versus running away from it. And by running into it, I ran through it. And when I was running away from it, I was running in the same direction. So I stayed in the storm longer, man. So embracing the problems, understanding that everything that where if I'm not where I want to be, it's my fault and it's only my fault. If it's somebody else's fault, I've given away responsibility to fix it. So, instead of pointing the finger this way, just pointing it this way. And really, instead of, I spent a long time trying to figure out who I was. Well, it was actually selfish thinking that way because when I figured it out, it was what I do for other people. That's who I am. When I figured out how to shift it and aim it that way, that's when life
Yeah,
changed.
got it. Okay, so it's the riptide, right? So when you were swimming against it, you were just pulling yourself back. When you decide to swim with it, that's what they tell you at the beach, right? Like just swim, just don't fight it, right?
Right.
Right? Let it embrace you. So, okay, cool, man. So, you know, how do you incorporate family into it, man? Because everybody says that when you work for yourself or you're trying to create a thing for yourself, you really don't have time. But how do you manage, being the great father you are and husband, and manage to do the things that you do?
Well, it's not my journey. It's my family's journey. So they've got to be bought in on like everything that I'm doing, they support. They know what it is. They support what I'm doing. And just like I support them in their dreams, right? So we are a unit, we're a team, we're on this journey together. And that's really important, man, because if you don't have support at home, in my opinion, you fail. In my opinion, you fail. But if you do have support at home, there's no greater tool, there's no greater energizer that anybody could ever have than the support of your family, man. So I actually wrote it down the other day. I was in a deep thought, and I
Hmm.
was like, people ask me a lot that exact question you said, and so what I said is basically I was like, my daughter's 4 years old. Her name is Ansley. She's like, she's my heart. You know what I mean? She's my love. My son is literally like a piece of me. Like he is me reincarnated, but better. He's a better version of me than I am today. He's literally my hero. My wife is the most important piece because my wife is literally like my relationship with Christ. My wife is my eternal life. And that's how like our family unit kind of comes together. And that lets me know what I am for them and their journey too, right?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, we kind of live similar, we try similar paths when it comes to family and trying to make sure that we try to get, all those things in check that we have to get it knocked out. So, talk to me a little bit now about, you started off, right? You grew the insurance company and you still run it, but you kind of handed it off to your wife to kind of to take the next steps, right? And now you're more so in like you said, helping others grow. How are you trying to help others grow and achieve their goals?
Well, it starts with strategy. It starts with having the right goals and targets, the right reasons to do whatever it is that you do. And so, yeah, we help people scale, whether it be through strategy, through advertising and marketing. You know, most small businesses, certain people wear more hats than is ideal. It's just a part of the growth process. And when that happens, there's an old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that just goes untouched or unnoticed. And by working with me, we find that low-hanging fruit pretty much overnight, immediately. And that changes things because again, when everything that I do or everything that I work with people on, I'm literally just teaching them or showing them what worked for me because that's truly the only thing I can have a factual opinion on. There's a lot of different ways to do pretty much anything, but what I can speak on is what I did and what worked for me and what didn't work for me, my history, right? So there's I love a quote by Rory Vaden where he says, you're most uniquely and powerfully positioned to serve the person that you used to be. That's who my clients are, people that are walking the same path or a similar path, and they're just a couple of chapters behind in that journey, right?
Okay. All right. So I mean that makes sense too. So I mean, and I can kind of relate to that, as far as trying to help other, you try to give more than you can. You try to just give because that's how you cast out that positive energy in order to get those things back to you. So content creation, I mean, you're great at it, right? I watch your show, I see your reels, and I was fortunate to be a guest on your show. How are you helping people with their personal brand, and kind of getting their brand out there? And what things would you give? What advice would you give? And what things are you doing to kind of help people bring that out of themselves?
Well, there's two reasons that people haven't bought into the social media movement. Reason number one is they don't believe that they're worthy. They don't believe anybody's going to watch them or pay attention to them or want to hear what they have to say. Which, if you think about it, that's selfish. Everything they said was about them. I don't think anybody wants to hear me, right? Well, you're not doing it for you. You're doing it for everybody else. Everything that you're doing is for everybody else. I never make a dollar unless a problem is solved, right? That's how you make money. And if you think about it, the people that make the most money solve the biggest problems or solve the most problems or a combination of both. So at the end of the day, people don't buy into social media because they don't believe in themselves or they don't believe that the hype is real. And it takes about 2 seconds to have a conversation with somebody to get to disprove that because It is real. At the end of the day, you have your own TV station or network in your pocket through social media. What's the difference between an ABC network or the Joe Rogan podcast network? They both have a large audience. They both have a a huge pile of consumers, and they are broken down by demographic, and they can advertise to those demographics, right? It's pretty simple if you think about it. And like, social media is not always going to be free. All right. As a matter of fact, there's more advertisements that pop up on your stuff now. Even on Facebook, you can't even watch 2 or 3 reels without a advertisement pocket popping up. And it took me a minute to realize what was even happening when it did. So, eventually this stuff's going to be you're going to be charged for it. But Gary Vee said this like 10, 15 years ago. He said, dude, social media is a party that everybody's at. Some people might be late to that party, but you got to go to that party. You got to get noticed. And Gerard, check it out. I'm holding up my phone right here, right? People are spending 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day looking at a device. People can't do business with you if they don't know that you're there, right? So you've got to go where they're at. They're on their devices. Are you? Is your brand on that device? Can they find you there? That's extremely important. And then when they do see you, will they see you over and over again? Think about this. So we live in Music City. Tim McGraw releases a song on the radio. Jelly Roll releases a song on the radio. Does Jelly Roll only want that song played once? Or does he want it played over and over and over again?
and
Does he
over
want
again.
it played more than anybody else, right?
Yep. So I mean, so you said that, right? So you talked about it, and you said that it's going to cost sometimes. So, um, some things cost more than others, and in my business, I believe you get what you pay for, right? And you can get anybody to do a job. You can get anybody. You can hire anybody to do anything, but there's a premium level of service that you get at a certain level, and then so you have the wholesale market, right, where you can just buy as much quantity as you want, or you might have to pay a premium for some things for a little bit more quality. So, talk about how quality versus quantity can set you apart.
Well, all right. So as consumers, we all have certain things that we care about more than others. All right. So a buddy of mine would be a cigar connoisseur. He doesn't like a $10 smoke. He wants a stick that costs 150, 250, $350, right? Versus a $10 stick. Same thing with like whiskey. All right. There's whiskey that sits in the well and there's whiskey that sits on the top shelf. I can't tell the difference, right? But some people can.
Right.
When it comes to that, I think that's the mistake that maybe people are making is when you're new to something, you kind of generalize it, right? You're not real specific about it, but the things that you care about most, the most intricate details about it. And if advertising on social media can grow your business, I would push everybody to not generalize it, to get very specific about it, to learn all the intricate details that come along with it so that you can use those. Because social media is just a tool, right? So, I'm not a great craftsman by any means. So you could give me, the best craftsman in town, the best carpenter in town, the best builder in town. You could give me his exact same tool belt and put it on my waist. I can't do with those tools what he can, right? Because I haven't learned the intricate details. I haven't learned the craft. So I think the mistake that people make when they're getting into social at first is they DIY it. They do it themselves and they get mediocre results because they're not an expert at it. But then they don't know how to hire it out either. They don't know, there's a great restaurant here in town, a steakhouse called Jeff Ruby's. The steak's minimum is going to be, $100 versus
Good stuff.
Outback. Outback, it's $20. People know, they don't question the $100 steak versus the $20 steak, right? But when you hire, let's say a media team or a content creator or a content strategist, are they the $100 steak or the $20 steak? You need to figure that out, right? Because you get what you pay for, like you said, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, you don't want to find out by biting into the piece of meat on which steak you got, right? So you got to kind of look at it beforehand. So
I wouldn't want to, yeah.
no, man, no, not at all. So brand, and that's the thing, right? So you get what you pay for. I see that how you brand things. I see how it works. And so, what kind of engagements are you getting, and how are you now? I've seen that, saw a recent announcement that you're doing some other bigger things. So, how were you able to catapult, and like, what was the multiple? Like, I know you put some stuff out there, and you kind of played around. So, how did you figure out the recipe for success, and then how are you helping others with it?
Well, it was a journey of about, 4.5 to 5 years, and six, maybe seven figures of school investing, trying things out. Again, everything that we're teaching, that we're advising people to do, or that we're doing for our clients, it's what worked for me, or what's worked for us. Like, we've got a direct history with it, right? So that's the thing, man, is like, people don't have to. Brad, my buddy Brad has a book. He says, "Lessons I learned the hard way, so you don't have to." That's pretty much what I'm doing. If it took me 5 years, it might only take you 3.5 or 4, because we can collapse time, because we're going to eliminate some mistakes. You still got to learn some things. You still have to become an expert, but we can collapse time by doing it that way, right? And more importantly, understanding specifically what your target is. So the best at anything is the one that can hit the smallest target, right? And it's the same way in business and revenue, right? Are you chasing seven figures? Or are you chasing a specific seven-figure dollar amount? And then when you work backwards from that, it's kind of like the GPS on your phone. If you just type in Nashville, Tennessee, where are you going to end up? Right? But if you give it a
Right.
specific address, it's going to tell you you're going to end up at the right spot. It's going to tell you how long it's going to take to get there. When life happens, if something falls in the road or there's a wreck, it's going to say, "Hey, you might want to try an alternate route with a new
Sure.
arrival time," and so on and so forth. Right? So that's kind of like what life's all about. You set a target and you start moving towards that target. And then when things get in the way, which they will, you just have to know how to get around those things, but you never lose sight of that target. The GPS didn't lose sight of the specific address that you gave it when you're going there, even though it gave you a totally different route. That's the key. And most people
Got it.
that we see that fall, that lose on that, is the distraction or the obstacle makes them lose focus of the target.
And that's what it is. It's like everybody has a plan, and everybody thinks they have a plan, but this is the distractions, and it's the rerouting, right? So just like you said, if you're trying to get to a target and then it takes you, the traffic backs up and it detours you two or three times, a lot of people just stop driving.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Or they get lost, or one or the other,
Mhm.
right?
That,
So
that's it. That's exactly right. And understanding too where you're at in that journey. That's probably one of the biggest things we do, Gerard. I went. Everybody that graduated high school went to school for at least 13 years, K through 12. Can you imagine if you'd gone to school for 6, 7, 8 years and you didn't know if you were going to be like when you were going to be done? Like, it would seem
yeah.
endless. It would be like a prison sentence without knowing when you're up for parole or when you can get out. So the judge says, "Boom, guilty. You're going to jail," and then you stop talking. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it don't work that way. So, I call it content fatigue. A lot of the people that, when I first started working with people on this, we didn't focus on the strategy as much. We focused on the deliverables, the content itself, the content creation, and the distribution on the socials. 90 days went by, and it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, and it can get expensive. And then there's, like, you can't trace any revenue. There's no return on investment that you can gauge. 90 days is when most people stops. It's the same for podcasting. Like, most podcasters, there's some great analytics on this. But let's just say, I don't have them in front of me. Like, it's over 95% of podcasters never get past episode 10,
Yeah.
right? So people start and then they quit. They didn't finish, they quit, right? If you
Sure.
finish something, it's my belief that God's gonna the beginning of one thing is the end of something else. But if you don't get to the end, if you don't complete it and finish, you don't get the gift of what's next, right?
Sure.
So I didn't quit baseball. I finished. There was some hard facts that I had to realize and come to grips with, and I had to make a tough choice, and I made it. And
Sure.
I've learned to make those tougher choices faster now. I've learned to embrace making those tough choices, because that's when life changes.